In section 3.5, we are introduced to the special right triangle called a 45-45-90, and that refers to the angle measures. Before we can work successfully on those triangles, let's practice rationalizing the denominators of fractions. In the first problem, 4 over root 2, my goal is to remove the square root from the denominator, and the approach that I take is to multiply top and bottom by root 2. When I multiply across, now I'll have 4 times root 2 in the numerator, and in the denominator, root 2 times root 2 is root 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. Then the 2 on the bottom can cancel with the 4 on the top because they are not underneath a square root symbol. So 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 4 twice. Then I get 2 root 2 as my answer. Number 2, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by root 3. When I multiply across now, I'll get 6 root 3 over the square root of 9. When they're underneath the radical, you're multiplying the numbers underneath the radical. 3 times 3 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. Now that I have a 3 on the bottom that is not under a radical, there is a 6 on the top that is not under a radical. I can cancel them. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 6 twice. 2 times root 3 is 2 root 3. Number 3, multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. In the numerator, I get 10 root 2. In the denominator, I'll get the square root of 4, which is 2. So that 2 in the denominator cancels with the 10 in the numerator. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times root 2 is 5 root 2. Now you do 4, 5, and 6. Turn off the video and turn it back on when you're done. Now I'll show the answers for 4 through 6. The next set of problems, we have a radical on the top and on the bottom. We still use the same approach. Multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. On the top, when I multiply across, I'll get the square root of 6. On the bottom, as you know, I'm going to get 2. Now the 2 on the bottom cannot cancel with the 6 on the top because the 6 is underneath a radical. You have done all that you can do, so circle that answer. Multiply top and bottom by root 3. You get root 15 on the top and 3 on the bottom. I cannot cancel those. They are not both under the square root, and they are not both outside of the square root. So you are done. Notice how I just multiply the 2 times the 7, because they're both under the square root. The denominator has a 2 in it, and that 2 in the denominator will cancel with the 1 that was already in the numerator, and your answer is the square root of 14. Now I would like you to pause the video and do the last 3 problems on your own. Then turn the video back on to check your answers. I will now write the answers to these 3 problems. So let's look at this triangle. What kind of triangle am I outlining here? Do you see a right triangle? You should also see that the legs of the right triangle are the same length. So there's a 4 on this side and a 4 on this side. What would the length of the hypotenuse be? So I'm going to set up 4 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. 16 plus 16 is c squared. We have 32, and when I take the square root, I get 4 root 2. So the hypotenuse of this purple triangle is 4 root 2. The legs are 4, and the hypotenuse is 4 root 2. I'll pick another hypotenuse. Let's go all the way up to here. This hypotenuse goes with these legs. What are the length of these legs? Can you count them? I see 7 and 7. I'm going to check and figure out the hypotenuse of this green triangle. 7 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. So 49 plus 49 is 98. So this hypotenuse is 7 root 2. The legs were each 7, and the hypotenuse is 7 root 2. So if I knew what was going to happen, I could just take the leg and multiply by root 2, and I would get the hypotenuse. Let's see if that works for a third triangle. Count how many squares would be in the leg of this large triangle. Are you counting 10? What do you think the hypotenuse of this triangle will be? Should I multiply by the square root of 2? When I take the square root of this, I get 10 root 2. So there's a pattern here. The triangle 45, 45, 90 is special because the legs are congruent. And every time I get one leg, I could find the other leg because the legs are congruent. I just need to know that it's a 45, 45, 90. In this case, you could count the squares, so you could see that the legs were congruent to each other. Another approach that you could get is I might give you triangles showing that these two angles are congruent. So the acute angles of the triangle being congruent means that they're 45 degrees each. That signifies you have a 45, 45, 90, and you can use this relation. Now, let's go backwards. If I'm going to take a leg and multiply by root 2 to get the hypotenuse, what do you do to the hypotenuse to go in reverse to get the leg? So to go in reverse, I would undo multiplication, which would be dividing. So if you divide by root 2, you can go from the hypotenuse and find the leg. Let's practice that down below. We'll start with number 1. We have a leg of 12. That means the other leg is 12. See how they're marked congruent? Now how do you go to the hypotenuse? Do you remember? You take the leg and you multiply by the square root of 2. So the hypotenuse is 12 root 2. Okay, you do number 2 and then check your answer with me. So pause the video. Okay, in number 2, you know this is a 45, 45, 90 because you were given that these acute angles are congruent. So that means this is 45 degrees and this is 45 degrees. So that means the legs are congruent. The 7 on the bottom leg is the same as the 7 on the left leg. What do you do to the leg to get the hypotenuse? You're going to multiply by root 2. So the hypotenuse of this triangle is 7 root 2. Number 3, they tell us the legs are congruent. One of them is 3 root 5. That means the other one is 3 root 5. And we're going to do the same thing now to find the hypotenuse. We're going to multiply by the square root of 2. So 3 root 5 times root 2 is going to be 3 root 10. I just multiply the numbers underneath the radical. 5 times 2 is 10. In number 4, we're going to go backwards now. First of all, you can see we have a 45, 45, 90 because the acute angles are marked congruent. And before, we were multiplying by root 2 to go from the leg to the hypotenuse. But now we're going to go from the hypotenuse to the leg. To undo multiplication, we're going to divide by root 2. That means it's going to look like this. 20 divided by root 2. Now you know why we practiced on the first page. We're going to multiply top and bottom by root 2. That means I have 20 root 2 over 2. The 2 and the 20 are going to cancel. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 20 10 times. So the leg is 10 root 2. And this leg is 10 root 2. Okay, now you try number 5. Pause the video and then come back to check your answer. To go backwards, you need to divide by the square root of 2. That means we're going to take 16 and divide it by root 2. Multiply top and bottom by root 2, and you get 16 root 2 over 2. The 2 on the bottom cancels with the 16 on the top. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 16 8 times. So the leg is 8 root 2. So is the other leg, because they are congruent. The last page is supposed to say the following triangles are all 45, 45, 90 triangles. In number 6, we have a leg that has length 7. So you could draw a picture if you need to. I've got a 45, 45, 90. A leg is 7. What do you do to the leg to get the hypotenuse? You multiply by the square root of 2. So the answer to number 6 is 7 root 2. Try the next two problems, 7 and 8. Pause the video and do 7 and 8. Number 7, if the leg is 5 root 2, that means I'm going to multiply by root 2 to get the hypotenuse. So root 2 times root 2, remember, is root 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. This is multiplication then between the 2 and the 5. The hypotenuse would be 10. If you need a drawing, make sure you mark the legs congruent, and we're going to multiply by root 2, and that gets us 10. Number 8, if the leg is 4 root 3, I'm going to multiply by root 2 to get the hypotenuse, so that would be 4 root 6. Okay, I hope you got those two correct. Now we'll have questions where they give us the hypotenuse. So I'm going to draw a picture on the first one. Draw the right angle, draw the legs congruent, and now you have a 45, 45, 90. The hypotenuse is 15 root 2. To go backwards now, I'm going to divide by root 2. So 15 root 2 divided by root 2 is going to get me 15. Now you try the next three and then turn the video back on to see the answers. Number 10, take 9 root 2 and divide by root 2. The root 2's are going to cancel, so the length of the leg would be 9. Number 11, 6 root 3 is the hypotenuse, therefore I'm going to divide by root 2 to get the leg, but I need to rationalize the denominator. So multiply top and bottom by root 2. On the top, I'll get 6 root 6. On the bottom, I'll get a 2. The 2 on the bottom cancels with the first 6 on the top. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 root 6 is the length of the leg. Number 12, hypotenuse is 14, so I'm going to divide by root 2 to get the leg. But I can't leave the answer like that. I need to rationalize the denominator. So multiply top and bottom by root 2. The top, I'll have 14 root 2, and on the bottom, I'll have a 2. The 2 on the bottom cancels with the 14 on the top. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 14 7 times. So the length of the leg is 7 root 2.